Hello everyone, welcome back to the NPC Dungeon. This week we're talking all about some of the other jobs that a DM might find themselves having to do when running a game, both at and away from the table. I'll be honest with you, DMs have a lot of responsibilities and we have to wear a lot of hats, but it isn't that bad once you know what you're in for. Like I like to say, running a game like this is super rewarding and super fun, and this list is not meant to scare you away. In fact, it is by no means exhaustive. It just includes some of what I see as some of the most prevalent responsibilities that DMs might encounter that don't involve running the game. At least, these are the ones that I most often encounter. Today's episode won't be super long, but I still hope you like it. If you do, feel free to leave a like. It lets me know what I'm doing right and what I can improve and how I can improve. Those of you who've been with me for a while know how much I love improving this channel for all of you. And if you really like what I have to say, feel free to subscribe so you know when I release new videos. I release DM advice videos like these on Fridays, and usually I release stories on Saturdays, but I'm taking a brief break from that for right now. I also release a short video every single day, so be on the lookout for that as well. And with all that obligatory, shameless self-advertising out of the way, let's get started and let's learn something. The first thing that I'm going to mention about other DM jobs is probably a really obvious one, but it's still important enough that I'm mentioning it here, and it is resolving rule discrepancies. There will be cases when the rules will end up being kind of gray, and where the rules don't exactly cover. The truth is that it's hard to make a system that can account for everything that you and your players might do, especially when things get chaotic, and things will get chaotic. By the way, if you have any moments in your campaigns or campaigns you're in where rules got a little gray, feel free to let me know in the comments. I always like to read them, and I usually always reply. And even if there is a rule for it, we might forget. Now, I'm not going to say that you need to know every single rule because you won't, but it does help to have a good understanding of how the rules work though, like how some successful saves do half damage, how some spell attacks invoke saves while others are an attack roll. It's also nice to know what a player can do on their turn and what provokes an attack of opportunity, just for a few examples. And by the way, again, if you have any other things that you think might be important for DMs to know and understand, leave them in the comments. And if you can't remember it all, don't worry, who could? Leave some notes either on your DM screen or just notes in front of you, whatever works best for you. Experiment around and see what works best for you. And lastly, when actually settling the rule dispute, it's usually best to just come up with a quick solution on the spot and leave a note to look it up later. And when coming up with this quick solution, I like to err in favor of my players. Not always, but most of the time. Here's an example. I once had a player casting Magic Circle and keep an undead away. I couldn't remember the casting time, so I just let them do it instantly. I looked it up later, and then we started running the spell correctly. Sometimes, though, it is perfectly okay to just look it up, because sometimes we have no idea, and that's okay. D&D rules are things that we just kind of learn over time. Just remember to be fair and try to do it quickly enough that you keep the game going. But next up is a point that doesn't necessarily even involve running the game, and it is scheduling. Now, obviously, the DM doesn't necessarily have to be the one to schedule. If you have a player who's good at it and wants to, by all means. I'm just usually the one who's in my groups because I happen to be pretty decent at it, and it's just one less thing for my players to worry about. Now, scheduling by its very definition is a group effort. You need to get everyone's availabilities before you even meet. I like to text my players and ask them what days they can meet, what days they can make it, find a common day, and boom, you're good. But of course, it isn't always that simple. You might have to get kind of creative with it and meet every other week or on different days in order for everyone to make it, and it doesn't stop there. I like to text my players every week, a day or two before that week's session, just to see if they can still make it and if their availabilities have changed at all. And lastly, in terms of canceling, I usually only cancel either if I, as the DM, can't make it, or if a player has been absent for 2 sessions in a row or so. If I have a player who will be gone for several weeks or so, for example, I'll still keep having sessions, though possibly at a lesser rate, like every other week or so. But one more thing that you might have to do that doesn't necessarily directly involve running the game might be helping with characters and such. And as you might have guessed, I'll be talking about all of that next. The first part of this that I'm going to talk about is the game rule part, and I'll say the same thing here that I said before. Learn this stuff as you go. If a player asks you a question you don't immediately know the answer to, look it up together and use both of your best judgments. Same goes for balancing homebrew stuff for your players. What I like to do in the case of homebrew characters is look at the races, classes, etc. featured in the book and compare those with how many features, score increases, etc. that each has with the homebrew that your player is presenting to you. Does the homebrew class have too much? Does it have too little? And then get back to your player. See what additions they might want to make in the second case and what they might be okay without in the first. And again, do this together. Don't just try to axe stuff from your player's characters without letting them know. That's just rude. But moving away from game rule stuff, you may also be asked how a character might fit into the world. Usually I try not to set restraints on what my players can play. My players can typically play pretty much whatever they want, and then I try to build my campaign around them. Obviously, try to keep the same balance principles that I mentioned before in mind, but when a problem arises, I don't like to say that they just can't play it. Instead, I'll see what they'd be okay with debuffing a little bit, or if they have other things they'd like to add on or play instead. Again, this is one of the things that you and the players do together. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about player conflicts. I have a few videos about this already, so I'll leave links to those down below and cards up above if you want, but for now, I want to say that if there is an argument between some of your players, and that isn't just an in-character debate or something, it's probably best for you as the DM to step in. What I like to do is remind them that we're playing a game, and that whatever's going on can be handled afterward, or if it's that important, they can step out and handle it away from the table. It can be all too easy for player conflicts to spill over into character conflicts, so that situations arise where players just use the game to get back at other people, and that's just immature, and if that begins to happen, ask them to stop, and if they don't, ask them to leave, at least for this session. You may not feel like it, but as the DM, people are going to look at you like the authority in matters like this. Now, I'm not saying put yourself in danger if it comes to that. I'm not qualified to speak on that kind of thing, so I'm not going to. I'm just talking about little squabbles that distract from the game or foster a toxic environment. And real quick, I'm not talking about players just speaking loudly or making jokes. I mean arguing. If you have players laughing, making jokes, all the better. I mean, there are times when we need to keep the story going, of course, but most of the time, at least for me, laughing, joking, that's okay. You need to know your table and you need to know your group and work from there. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching, and feel free to come back next week where I'll talk a little bit about ending arcs of your campaign. If you have any questions or ideas that you think I might have missed, feel free to comment down below. As I said, I always look at my comments and I almost always respond. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to check out the 2 videos to better show up on your screen, and until next time, let's learn something.